Success stories and interviews with game changers and thought leaders who have overcome both in life and in business. Welcome to Vertical Momentum.
Welcome to another episode of Vertical Momentum. I am your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, you know, whenever I have anybody on the show, they're game changers and thought leaders. And the gentleman that I'm going to have on has been on my show 3 times. He's the only 3-time guest I've ever had. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, the guys that sponsor my show 100% of the times, all the time. So I like to thank Ginger and David of Really Designs. They make all my t-shirts, they make all my swag, and it's all American made by hand, and they do everything themselves. So if you love swag, definitely check out Ginger and David at Really Designs, and I'll drop the link. And guys, if you're a business owner, you're going to want to get a piece of paper and a pen, and you're going to want to write some of this stuff down, because my brother Patrick is about to drop some serious knowledge, especially about marketing, SEO, anything to do with business. Patrick, my brother, how are you?
Oh boy, man, I'm doing good. I'm feeling good. As you know, today's my birthday. Uh,
Yeah, you
so
actually took time to hang out with me on your birthday. So that's like a birthday
of
gift
course,
for me.
man. Of course, of course. I mean, you're probably one of the. I was actually telling somebody about you the other day, and I'm like, man, this guy is. It's ridiculous how selfless this guy is, and how I mean, how you just help other people, and I look up to you in that aspect. And yeah, man, I'm always happy to be on any of your shows. Any way I can help you out, I'm always down.
Well, like I said, we're gonna. I just want to let the people know a little bit about you, about your background, your military service, and then because a lot of people, they want to know the man behind the calculator or the computer. So
For
tell us
sure.
a bit about you. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what kind of little kid was little Patrick.
Oh boy, little Patrick was a that was a nightmare. Um, but let's see. So yeah, with what I'm where to even start? So I guess I'll go ahead and start. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I'm actually a third generation Marine. I mean, I enlisted straight out of high school. I mean, it was like the day after graduation, I went to go swear in. So I kind of grew up knowing that I'd join. As I said, third generation, which is really interesting. After I graduated boot camp, of course, all 3 of us were sitting around, and it was like, oh yeah, in boot camp, I did this and I did that, and then of course, it went from like me telling my father, and my father's like, "Oh, that's nothing." And then, of course, my grandfather, being a Vietnam vet, was like, "Yeah, they just used to like beat the heck out of us." So I'm like, "Yeah, you can't do that no more." But
So now, what
um,
were you good in grade school? Were you good in high school? Were you a good athlete?
in
Were you good in school?
in school, believe it or not, I was actually extremely introverted. I was the type of kid that I was in ROTC or JROTC, but outside of that, I was fairly average in my grades. I didn't like school. I played like World of Warcraft and D&D. So I was like, I had my clique that I hung out with like the nerds and all, but like I'd say things didn't necessarily take off for me being social until after high school. High school was like, uh,
So now tell me because I love everybody's recruiting story, because everybody has a different recruiting story. So talk to me about the day you walked into the recruiter.
oh boy. So, because it was funny because like again, I knew that like I'm joining the Marines, like it's gonna happen, and so I walked in. I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do. Now, I was a fairly scrawny kid, and I mean, I couldn't get on the pull-up bar. I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't, I didn't do the crunches. Like I couldn't do any of that. But I'm like, hey, I'll do whatever I gotta do. And it was funny because the recruiter, like, so in recruiting school, they teach you, from what I know, like, okay, you gotta, build rapport, find common ground with the recruit. Um, and like my recruiter kept trying to talk about like guns and this, that, and the other, and like I was all about like Warcraft and like Lord of the Rings, and so he actually did research about Lord of the Rings to have conversations with me to try and build that rapport. But yeah, I walked in there and I was like, yeah, I'm down to go. So and from what he told me, I can't remember the word he used, but I was basically a saving grace. Like I was the one that made him hit his quota that month. So, but
So he didn't really have to work too hard to get you.
oh no, not at all. Like I was down from the get go, and yeah, the
So,
only hard part was really just getting the physical part down.
so what was it like getting the basic training? Because I had the opposite problem. See, I grew up north, and
Mm.
I was around a bunch of Southerners, and I was totally lost. So what was it like, going to basic training, a kid from Houston, and trying to integrate with all these new people from
It
all
was
across the world.
it was interesting. Like most because everybody from like I think it's what the west of uh is it the Mississippi River or it's I think it's the Mississippi River. It's like everybody west of the Mississippi River goes to San Diego and east goes to Paris Island. So it was mainly a lot of Southerners um, and like California kids and stuff like that. It wasn't that big of a culture shock. Now, after boot camp, whenever I got into my schooling, that was weird because I was encountering people from like the north and like the east coast, which I've never talked to before, and like just the differences was very interesting.
Yeah, we're the people on the East Coast. We're totally different people, and we use a lot of people like from the New York and New Jersey. They use the F word like everybody, like other
Oh
people.
yeah.
Hello and hi. You know. So now, when you graduated, where was your first duty station?
So first duty station, I went to Mississippi. Mississippi was I was on an Air Force base, which was spoiling. That definitely spoiled me. Um, Nothing too crazy happened there. I mean, I broke my arm. I had to get held back a little bit. And that was actually interesting because that was my first encounter with I'd say self-discipline in my life where I had to really push myself and hold myself to a higher standard, which I'll be honest, I kind of failed at. Um, and the main reason why I say that is so because I got held back and I was still in school, like I already graduated, but I couldn't go to my station because I was on med hold. And so I had to hang around with the kid, like the Marines that were getting like either separated out or they failed out of their school or like that's the type of people that I was around with. And that brings me to one of the principles that I learned very early on was you are who you surround yourself with. And so now I didn't know that at the time. And so I kind of went into this whole, you know, I'm not gonna say down in the dumps, but it was like I started slipping, you know. Um and but after that, I was there for about a year. And then I went to Japan and I finally hit the fleet. Um and it's weird because that was what, like a year and a half into my service, I finally hit the fleet and able to like do my job. And then immediately they're like, hey, we need somebody to go to the armory. And then so I was in the armory for 6 months. So I didn't actually get to do my job until like 2 to 2.5 years into my service. And then of course by that time I forgot everything. Like like it was kind of bad.
Now you did you deploy at all?
No, I did not. I like to say that I was a turbo pogue. So what I did was I was a radio calibrations technician. So I worked on me specifically. I worked on radios, but in my job in my MOS, what we would do is we'd work on like torque wrenches, weight scales, pressure gauges, and basically make sure that things read how they need to read. So if you put 100 pounds on a scale, it reads 100 pounds. And so we would adjust everything and make sure that everything is I believe it's metrology is the science behind everything.
Now you did 5 years almost to the day in the
Yes.
course. So what what was your transitioning out? Because like a lot of people that I've talked to now, I've talked to hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them have the same issues when they get out. Number one is they lose the camaraderie.
Right.
Number two is we're all hua, but we get used to getting paid on the 1st and the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Get used to getting BAQ, all that good stuff, and then we just don't have a mission anymore.
Right.
So, what was your transitioning like out?
Um, it was a very unique transition, I would say, because I know all of those problems. I'm familiar with all those problems. Um, but whenever I would say whenever I was over in Japan, I got connected with a friend that was a young millionaire, like go getter hustler type, right? And I mean, he was, I'd see him on like Facebook, and I'm like, man, this dude's on like private jets. Like, what does this guy do? So I reached out to him, and I got started with business with him. Um, and so whenever it was time for me to come out, like we already had a business in motion, we were already doing all this stuff, and now I'm not gonna lie, I was arrogant as hell, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna be a millionaire and I'm gonna do all this stuff. So I was like not worried, which I feel like is very common for a lot of people transitioning out. Is they're like, oh, everything will be fine, and then of course you actually get out and it's a whole different world. It,
Because like
it,
I
it
say,
was brutal.
everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got beat.
So now,
Yeah.
were you starting business while you were in the Marine Corps?
So yeah, whenever I was active, I started learning sales. Um, and this is a whole nother kind of conversation, but we always talked about being partners, but I never signed anything on paper, which is a red flag, which I didn't know about because I was naive. But he would have me do the sales, and so like I learned business principles. I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to manage customers. I learned what is value, what is a service, like how do you do this stuff, and I learned all that while I was active duty. So like whenever I was my last duty station was in Barstow, which funny story about that. You never skip the chain of command whenever you're talking to somebody, because I accidentally got that whole base removed as an option for my MOS by talking to the wrong people. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, it was a bit of a weird situation because the civilians never let us really do our job, and so I'm like, I ran into Lieutenant Colonel who was my CO in school. And I was like, oh, hey, what's up, sir? And we started talking, and he's like, how's Barstow? And I'm like, oh, well, the civilians don't let us do their job. And I started telling him about this stuff, thinking that he would say, oh, well, I'm going to talk to the civilians and make the Marines do their job. But instead, he's like, all right, well, we're just going to shut that base down for that MOS and send everybody everywhere. So, like, I was a little bit hated for a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Uh,
you were not exactly the most loved person on base.
Yeah, I wasn't really the most loved person. Like we had like 3 people get sent to Japan, and like legit, it was wild. But interesting story for sure. But yeah, while I was active, like in breaks, in my off time, I would be making calls. I would be reaching out to customers, and I mean, we started doing um like helping people get Instagram and Twitter followers for like personal brands and small businesses. And then whenever we got out, or whenever I got out, I we kind of transitioned it to, okay, we need to do more of an online presence. And this was like 2017. And it was around that time that a lot of businesses really started realizing like, hey, I got to start popping up online. Um, and it was through like getting people on Google and getting people on Yelp and like a Facebook page that I really started learning like, hey, this stuff is called SEO. And like there's a whole thing about it. And but yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I was like, oh, it's chow time. Let me go make a call. Like it was super rough doing that.
Okay, so now first, then we're going to get into something. I had you on my show, I think maybe July, August of 2020.
Hmm.
Thing was going great. And then all of a sudden I see a post in the Vetrepreneur Tribe or Success Engineers, maybe both.
Hmm.
The proverbial shit hit the fan,
Oh yeah,
and you kind of went dark for a little while. Not too dark,
yeah.
but you kind of were like, all right, I'm going to take a break for a couple of minutes. you know I want to reset and do a reset. So
Hmm.
talk to us, because I got burned in business, and like I
Oh
said,
yeah.
but this is not downing anybody, so I'm not calling anybody out,
Oh no,
but
for sure.
just talking in general. What
Um.
are the things we should do? Because I was with my friend. We were together 10 years, 11 years, and eventually I thought I was going to be a partner, and that
Mhm.
it didn't work out that way. But as a lot of it because I was presuming a lot.
Right.
So talk to us about not making presumptions.
Yeah, so a little backstory as to what actually happened. Pretty much that exact same thing. Like I was like we were buddies in high school and we were working together, and now I was the one running the company. The company was his on paper, legally, everything. But I was the one making the calls. I was the one getting the sales. I was the one managing uh the customers, doing the work, handling the problem, like all of that. I was doing all that. And I presumed because he would tell me, and of course there's a lot more behind it, but he would always tell me, he's like, hey, we need to hit these numbers, and like we can start hiring people, and we can do, here's a percent, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, let's keep going. So I went to extreme lengths, and I'm talking like over, since I got out, like I'd say a week after I got out, I drove home. Um, I spent like 2 days with my mom. Then I drove down to Houston, and like every day from like 7 to 10, I would work out of a Starbucks, and that was for like 2 years. I didn't have a personal life. I didn't do anything. I didn't go have fun. I didn't spend my money. Um, and then I went. I moved out of my parents. I moved in with a girl actually, and that was a little weird. But same thing, work constantly. And then I left that girl, moved back into my parents. Same thing, work. Then I moved in with a friend. Same thing, work, 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 work. And I finally got to a point to where I moved into like a high rise. And it was like that was my first ever apartment that I ever owned. So that spoiled me for sure. But everything was going super good. I mean, I brought that company myself from like 0 to 55 grand a month, recurring revenue, really good stuff. And the political climate got a little weird. Sales started dropping, and basically, uh, I wasn't getting paid the proper way, which I didn't necessarily know about. And that kind of brings me to my first thing is it's you have to talk and to other people in your industry and look at other things, because if you put on the blinders and you're like you only believe what, let's say, your partner or your work is telling you, which is like mistake number one that I did, because I cut off literally everybody except for this guy, and he was the sole influence in my life for, I'd say, 3 years. um and everything else I didn't take as credible because of kind of what he told me. There's a lot of like psychological craziness going on, but um, there's so many presumptions that I made of like, oh yeah, like just because he told me this, that, and the other, like this is gonna happen, and this is how it's gonna go. And so I mean that brings me to one thing that I learned is get things in writing. If you don't have things in writing, if you don't have goals in writing, you don't have ownership, you don't have tasks, you don't have like there's nothing that can be done, because I mean, one, people forget things, and it's not even like people maliciously forget things and then change things up against you. but it's like people just forget. And so, one day your tasks can be this, and this, and then, 2, 3 months later, a problem arises. And then, hey, why didn't you handle that? It's like, well, I didn't even know that that was my issue. Get things in writing, because that removes even the possibility of, you can't make presumptions, you can't make assumptions, you can't do anything of that. What is it they say about assuming, and it makes an ass of you and me,
No,
uh,
like I went through, and it cost me a lot of money
mhm,
with a family member and contracts, and I just signed a contract without reading it, and it cost me a boatload of money.
that
But
sounds like my enlistment.
it was it was the biggest teaching tool that,
Mhm,
and thank God that I learned how to read contracts, because like right before me and my wife were going for her divorce, they tried to slip some stuff in there right as we're walking into the chamber, and I'm like, no.
no.
Now, did you forget something? Hello. But
Yeah.
it's amazing how, unfortunately, like you had to get your ass kicked a little bit, and
Mhm,
but for you to, then you had to reboot and start your own business. So
mhm.
now talk to us about starting your own business, how it was, because the kind of person that, like we've known each other for years.
You're right.
You're always providing value. You're always building relationships. So was that one of your saving graces, that you had a lot of great relationships?
It was absolutely huge, and funny enough, I'm not gonna say it's mine entirely. However, I'm doing things the right way, and I'm going up the right chains in order to get things, par for partnership type stuff. But because of my relationships, because of my value that I give, I had so much attention that whenever I actually made that post and said, "Hey, I'm no longer with this company," um, I like, I had people offering me jobs. They're like, "Patrick, I've seen you work. Like, you do crazy things. Like, I want you." And I actually had my eyes set on, where I'm at currently, which is a company, Connected Funnels, and the owner I'm good friends with. Um, and we've been friends for a while, and I knew that he's a good guy, and basically he saw that happened, and he's like, "Look, um, I'll take care of you. Come over here, bring all of your knowledge over, and like we can literally set things up from the ground up." And I came over, helped him kind of revamp the company, brought over all my knowledge, all my experience, and yeah, I mean now we're doing, like, I'm basically had to start from ground zero again, but I'm already moving, um, with so much speed, you know. Um, and yeah, but yeah, those relationships are huge.
And I got to
Absolutely
say,
huge.
if it wasn't for you, I would not be where I am today, even though I'm nowhere great, compared to some other people that I'm shooting for, like Jocko Willett. He's number
Mhm.
one, and I'm only number 8, so I got a lot of work to do. But without you, I wouldn't have, thought about putting a Google My Business. Um,
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't thought of some of the things that you've taught me. Um, and kind of like using the whole birthday thing on Facebook, to
Mhm.
it actually, like I was telling somebody the other day, that they have a feature called upcoming birthdays. And
Mhm.
if you go and say, if I send a person a message, happy birthday, their stuff, my stuff starts getting seen on their feed automatically. And a
Mhm.
lot of people don't use that. I mean, it's not, it's great, to keep in touch with everybody and wish people a happy birthday, but it's also, it's a tool that they can use, that if you don't know about it, you don't really know. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. And yes, especially with like stuff like that, there's so many little tidbits in the algorithms that you can use. Like, for example, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's on TikTok, and she teaches not social media marketing. And so it's not necessarily like for businesses, but she teaches how the algorithms work. She teaches how the artificial intelligence works and how these things work on a very intricate level. And to prove a point, she started a new TikTok, and within like 3 days, she had like 100,000 followers, and she would break things down into like a psychological principle and how the mechanics work. So literally she would talk about, like, she did a whole video on the colors of your background and how different colors can get you more views because, a light blue, a pretty color, can get more attention than, let's say, a harsh dark or a harsh red. And same thing with, like, it's proven that if you have a dog in a video, you get more likes. Like, how on like TikTok and in these other programs and platforms, if you ever do a video and you're talking, make sure that you subtitle it. Um, because the algorithms will scan the actual video and read the subtitles and then give, like, if let's say in your subtitles you're talking about dogs, it will give that information, or it'll grab that information. It will push you in front of more people that like dogs. Um, and so, like, there's all types of little things, and just like you said with the birthdays, like, there's all these little aspects that go into the algorithm and into the features of these platforms that you can leverage to not only keep in touch with people, but grow a reach and grow your audience.
Now, like I said, we're involved in a couple groups together,
Mhm.
Success Engineers, Entrepreneur Tribe, and I'll talk
Right.
about it later. But talk to us about, because a lot of people, like, when they hear SEO, it is complicated in a way,
Mhm.
but in a way, a lot of it is like common sense, and you break it down Barney style, especially for people like me, like, like talking about, long tail words,
Mhm.
and I never really put two and two together, like, if I put out a post about, like our this video when it goes out, have, some long tail SEO, but also some short tail.
Mhm.
But I never thought about what somebody else is looking up and what I look up. I never thought it being the same thing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, SEO is very interesting because I think it's last time I checked, there's like 200 or so factors for, like, let's say, local SEO. And there's just so many different things. And one of the best things that I could tell people is start by putting yourself in your customer's shoes. And I know that's something that business owners hear all the time. It's like, put yourself in your customer's shoes. But it's like, really think, hey, if I had this problem, what would I look for? What would I search for? What would I pick? And you have to, the hardest part about it is you have to be unbiased, because you can't say, like, oh, well, I look pretty because it's me, like, you have to really ask yourself these questions. And whenever you start asking yourself these questions, then it comes down to, like, okay, cool. um what do I have to do? I have to pop up in these searches, and there's all types of things such as, like, long tail keywords. And, like, I'm not gonna lie, SEO can be more of a rabbit hole than the freaking matrix, right? but Um, but for the basic business owner, like, if you're, hey, I'm a tire shop and I'm trying to cater to, 10 square miles, whatever it may be, all you really got to focus on is just building an online presence and being out there. Because Google Google breaks things down into all of these factors, and there's different types of SEO, what we call white hat, gray hat, and black hat. So, of course, Google wants you to focus on the user. And so if you always focus on just being out there and writing good stuff and giving value to your user, you will always rank. You will always pop up. It just might take longer. And then, of course, you have people that do, like, black hat stuff, where they try to game the game. And to a certain extent, you kind of have to, but it's whenever you try and, like, you find an exploit in the algorithm. It's like, oh, if I talk about cats, I'm going to rank higher, even though you sell tires. It's stuff like that that you want to watch out for. Um, but mainly just focus on being out there, talking about what you do, and giving value to people. Because one of the biggest updates is there's like the hummingbird. I think it's a hummingbird where Google scans all the content you put out, and they can tell if you're fluffing it with keywords, and they can tell if it makes sense for a person to read versus a computer. And so if you do everything you do with the end user in mind, you'll never go wrong.
And I love that, kind of like my podcast, a lot of it's about, self-development, self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of, they'll tell you, like I said, stuff that you've taught me, and I'm always listening, and whatever you post you put out, I'm following. So, that if you talk about it, whatever's, in your headline, make sure that
Mm-hmm.
it's that you guys are actually talking about it in the interview. So the
Mm-hmm.
words are coming up in the interview and also in the headline, and then also in not the bio, but in the context of, the header.
Right.
But a lot of people don't realize that, and I didn't realize it. And I'm like, that really makes a lot of sense. But if you don't think about it, you're like, okay,
Right.
you know. So what is
It's
so and I also something I've really learned, and I've been really, because now I started. You told me to start a new vertical momentum podcast
mm-hmm.
for Google Your Business. Now, if I put an update in there, um, I hear crickets. But if I post a picture, all of a sudden, like I got a thing that said your picture was seen like 2,500 times. It's
Right.
amazing how something as simple as posting a picture, Google will push it out. But if you put an update, you hear crickets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, because now I'm not gonna lie, with your type of business, it's very interesting. Not a lot of podcasts have, let's say, Google My Businesses, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if I can get reach on anything, I can get reach. It's like for an average business, for them to be on, let's say, Pinterest. Like some businesses have no business being on Pinterest, but if it works and if they can get reach and they have the time and it's not like a lot of involvement for them, it's like, screw it, why not? All you need is a click that leads to a call, that leads to a sale, or whatever it may be, a listen. So wherever it comes from doesn't really matter as long as it happens. Um, but yeah, like with stuff like that, Google loves content. And a big thing also is Google loves consistency. So a lot of people will get on Google, and here's kind of the funny thing. People will get on Google and then they'll do all this stuff once and they'll never touch it again. And then they'll be like, why am I not popping up? And it's like, because Google cares about consistently using their platform. They want you to constantly do more. Um, a good thing to remember is if, like, there's no such thing as a free service at the end of the day. If you're using something for free, like it's like you're the product, you know? And that's how it is with Google. And that's how it is with Facebook too. It's like you are the product. You're the actual thing that they're building everything around. It's not so that you can go on Facebook and post. That's not what Facebook's for. Facebook's for data. Facebook's so that they could get your data and sell it to advertisers, and they could build all these platforms around that. And it's the same thing with Google. So Google wants you to constantly use their platform, and the more you use their platform to a certain degree, I mean, there's point of diminishing returns, but the more you use their platform, the more you engage on their platform, the higher they kind of reward you and make you rank a little bit more. And so that's why that happens. Um, because a picture content is higher than text, or if you change a phone number or like little updates like that.
Okay, now I have a lot of questions because now we're going to get into business, and a lot of people are going to listen to this about a lot of people have in the past. I'm not saying now because things change.
Mm-hmm.
They've bought followers on Instagram or
Ooh.
and all of a sudden they have like say 100,000 followers because they bought a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them, and they put out a post and they get 3 reactions.
Right.
And so a lot of, and because they're only getting that 3 reaction, the money that they spent to get those followers, they're not being seen anymore by Instagram, right?
Right. Right. So buying followers is actually like one of the worst things that you can do because it one most of those followers that you buy are literally fake. Like they're just fake accounts and they will never engage. They will never do anything. It just bumps that follow number up. Um, and it's very easy to spot somebody that bought followers because if you look at their account, they have a million followers. I typically say it's like the rule of 10. Um, so if you have a million people following you, it should be 10% of that million, which is what is a 100,000. So I think better math. 100,000 people will actually see that post, and then out of 100,000 that actually see the post, 10% of that will actually engage on it, or do something, comment, like, whatever it may be. And now this is not always true, but it's a good ratio that I kind of judge. So if I see somebody with like 100,000 followers and they're getting like 10 likes, it's like, okay, something's up, you know, um, because it just shows that like, hey, these aren't actual real people because the people that it's showing to are fake accounts. And of course, if you really dive into it, you can see just by looking at their follower list, like, yeah, this is fake, that's fake, that's fake. But buying followers is just absolutely terrible. What it does is it skews the algorithm, that people don't engage. And what I mean by skewing the algorithm is if you have, let's say, Instagram followers, Instagram looks at your followers and it tracks that data. Like I mentioned, like this is all about data tracking. And it'll track the data of what they do, how they engage with it. But if they don't actually have any data, then Instagram looks at all of the people that are following you and is like, there's no data here. And so they can't use anything to push you in front of new people. So it completely skews things. You can start reaching like random people that have no interest in what you're doing. And I mean, I've seen entire accounts just die because of that, or get shadow banned, or I mean, all types of issues. Uh, and it's the same thing with like backlinks. So people buy backlinks off like Fiverr, and what they'll do is they'll go spend like $200 and buy like 1,000 backlinks for their website. And basically, how this looks at Google is Google looks at your website and be like, "Oh yeah, overnight you just got 1,000 backlinks." Well, that's BS for one, and two, all these backlinks are just trash. So it actually does way more harm than good. Way more harm than good.
Okay, so now I have another question because I got permanently banned from TikTok. Um, Permanently because I was posting stuff about veteran suicide, and
Mm,
I guess they were not happy with that, so they permanently banned me. So now I heard, I've been messing around with Instagram Reels now,
okay.
and because sometimes you have to play around and to figure out if this shit is real, if it's fake.
Right, right.
So like like if I put out a post, I'll usually get 20, 30 likes. But I did an Instagram reel yesterday and like 2,500 people seen it. So
Yeah.
talk to us about, and I found out, because like you said, you have to educate yourself. You have to work on your business
Hmm.
and in your business. That
Right.
like if I have a regular Instagram account, um, and I post something, only the people that are following me can see that. But if you put it on Reels, it opens up so it opens up to a lot bigger audience. So can you
Right.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So from how I understand, Reels is Instagram's uh basically reaction to TikTok. And the whole premise of it is it's to show, so think of like your Instagram story and you just scroll, but instead of people that you're following, it's people that you might not know. And so like that's the cool thing about TikTok is it's like, okay, yeah, in TikTok, you have the people that you're following, but you also have people that's like, oh, I've never known who this person was. But they're suggested to you based on the algorithm, based on the content itself. So um, that's like I mentioned whenever doing the TikTok stuff. If you do, um, let's see, if you do a video talking about dogs, then TikTok will show you to people that do not know who you are, but like dogs. And so that's why you can reach a stupid amount of people right now. And at the same time, the algorithms are super new. So there's all types of exploits, there's all types of ways that you can kind of game it, um, and not necessarily have consequences from that, but just reach a ridiculous amount of people. Is because it's so new, and that's what it's kind of designed to do, is to put you in front and introduce people to your content that don't know who you are.
Okay, so now talk to us about, because I hear some people say you're only supposed to use 5 hashtags. Some people say you can use up to 30, or
Mhm.
or if you use too much, they'll actually punish you for using too many hashtags. What is
Mhm.
what is the real deal?
Now, I typically, I'll be honest, hashtags in Instagram, I know it's changed since last time I really dove into it, but what I looked at, you can use up to 30. You have the maximum, and I typically tell people like, hey, I would use the maximum, but you got to break it down, um, because the misconception is a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm going to use 30 hashtags and I'm going to get in all 30 hashtags, and it doesn't really work that way. So I'll tell people again, you have to put yourself in customer shoes, but focus on, like, I'd say like 10 generic hashtags, 5 hashtags that are like really high traffic. So if, let's say, you do, you focus on like veterans, hashtag veterans, hashtag military, like they're going to be super high traffic, and the chances of you actually being on there and like somebody scrolling are going to be very low because they have so much content, but it's better to do that. And then you have some of the more specific ones, and like long tail. So it's kind of like SEO, where you have like your long tail ones and your short tail, and you have to do research into them to break down, okay, is this just so much high traffic it's not even worth getting into, or is this so low traffic that nobody even searches for it? And there's all types of tools for that. But yeah, hashtags I look at kind of like SEO. And again, at the end of the day, you really have to look at what people are searching for. And what I'll tell people is, don't describe what you're posting about. So like, if, let's say, I post my car, I have a yellow Mercedes, I wouldn't post about like yellow car, or like, I wouldn't describe the picture. I would type in hashtags that people would look at. So hashtag Mercedes, people look for that. Hashtag AMG, people look for that. um Hashtag fast cars, hashtag burnout, like stuff like that. um and that way you can position everything to what people actually type in, and not what you think would be cool to pop up in. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love it. Okay, so now talk to us. Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make? Now, I love the that checklist. I think that's one of the most amazing things you've ever done.
Oh yeah.
And I
um
actually saved it, and now I'm actually going through it and making sure that I'm doing whatever you tell me to do. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that new business owners make as far
I think,
as SEO?
uh for sure, I think some of the biggest mistakes that people make are gonna be more on the set it and forget it type mentality. I see that all the time. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a shameless plug. But so as I said, I handle, like, I focus on getting businesses online so that they can be found, trusted, and chosen over competition by people specifically looking for what they offer. And I mean, we do this for like $249 a month, right? Like nothing wild, nothing crazy. And we go and we manage Google and Yelp and Bing and Manta and Yahoo. And that's kind of the biggest thing I see people mess up on, is like they'll build a Facebook page and then they never use it. Or like they'll build a Facebook page, the page is super generic. It has like the logo isn't even filled in, the hours aren't there, they don't have their products there, they don't have their services there, the address is missing, like things like that. And people will then look at, okay, I'm on Facebook now, let me go pay for ads. It's like, no, you're not there yet. You need a good foundation, because not only is online presence like your branding, but it's your visibility. I mean, it helps with conversions. It's your image. And so I think the biggest mistake is that right there, is people will, like, let's say, get on Google, they fill it out a little bit, they never touch it consistently, and then they say, well, I guess I got to pay for ads now. And then they kind of just skip steps, and skipping the foundation, I think, is the absolute biggest thing, because the funny thing that I see about it is, like, so many people skip those steps that the people that actually put in the time and the effort to do those steps, like yes, it takes time, but I mean, they just climb through the ranks. I mean, they just start destroying everybody over time. And I'm actually going to be making another checklist here soon. I just got to finish it on website SEO, and it's going to go through like the metadata. What do you got to do? Like, what are the biggest things? Like your page speed, or your image is too big? Is your site updated? Like stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say that's really the biggest mistake people make, is they do the bare minimum on it. Like they'll get on Google, they'll get on Facebook and Instagram. They might get on Yelp. Don't pay for Yelp, by the way. It's terrible. But and then they're like, okay, now let's do paid advertising. And it's like, no, you're not there yet. If you build out more of a foundation and then you do paid advertising, not only do you have to spend less, but you're going to have higher conversions because you look better. And you have two full avenues in motion, not just one. Because if you build a business based around paid traffic, you're marrying your success to the fact that you're paying for that traffic. And if anything happens, like an ad campaign switches, the audience targeting changes up, you can't even do that audience anymore. Your ad account gets shut down. Like, you're screwed. I mean, I've seen businesses that will build around Home Advisor in the trades, and then Home Advisor will give you a string of bad leads, and it's like, yeah, I'm out $700, $1,000, and I have zero revenue coming in for the next 3 weeks. Like, I'm freaking panicking. So focus on organic, shake hands, be found, be visible, and then start doing paid stuff.
No, like I found, I've done Facebook campaigns, and I've boosted, and I found out I get much better results when I boost a post than when I do an ad campaign.
Okay.
But everybody has different results. But
right.
like when we went to the MIC conference, the MIC conference. And was it 2019?
Yeah, I think so.
And I had, we got to hang out with Mr. Dennis Yu, and he was talking about, sometimes even if you're spending $1 a day is a lot, you can get a much bigger reach spending $1 a day than some of these companies that are spending hundreds of dollars a month.
Oh yeah.
Just by boosting some of your content. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I typically break down, first things first, boosting and ads are different. And I like to, anybody that's listening, you have to know that.
Yep. That's why you're here.
Yeah. So boosting a post is really, you don't have a full toolkit to use, I suppose. Like, let's say you boost a post and it's like, hey, I have a podcast coming on today on the 21st. You put some money behind it and shows it to different people. And you can have kind of a general audience for that and stuff like that. For a paid ad, this is where you kind of have to do some research and know what you're doing and have like a funnel and a plan. Because for a paid ad, you could do targeting. You could do different steps. Okay, where do these people go? What do they see? Is there pictures? Is there multiple products? Like, do they go to a landing page? Do they input information? I mean, and you have to plan things several steps out in order to get it functioning the right way, and you have to test it. Like, I'll tell people with a boost, typically, if you're going to do a boost, do it low budget, do it consistently, but count that money as going into brand awareness and visibility, and not like trying to get sales from it, if that makes sense.
Yep. And I just
Um,
put this out there. If there's anybody, because I made the mistake when I first started doing this, and I did an ad, and it was pay per click, and all of a sudden my website got like 5,000 viewers, and then I got a huge bill for like $800. So do not make
oh God.
make sure that you're paying attention to whatever you're doing, and do not click the wrong button. So I just wanted to
I
throw that out there.
Oh man, I ran into somebody, I think this was 2 years ago, and I felt so bad because like at the time, like I wasn't able to walk her through it, and like it was a whole shenanigan things. But it was like her and her husband uh were working this company together, and she got started with an ad campaign, and like something happened to her husband. I don't know if they were like getting a divorce or like he was sick or something, but like she couldn't figure out how to turn the ads off. And like I sent her the guides on like, hey, you got to do this, that, and the other. And it was something on like I don't have access to it. And so she was just getting billed like, and it was like $800 a month. Like it was a lot of money, you know, and it was just draining, and it was just draining. And I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, you gotta watch things because, and it all happened because she thought she like set it up to where it was a budget, but she set it up to be like open ended or something,
Yep.
and it just didn't stop.
Yep.
And it just kept going, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
So now last two questions. How do we find you? Where can we start working with you? If we want you to come help our businesses. So how do we find you? How do we find your business?
For sure. So, easiest ways to find me is going to be on social media. Just about all of my tags and usernames are going to be at PTRKBURT. The company I'm working with is connectedfunnels.com. And I mean, we do everything from ads to SEO to, I mean, we're full service, so web design, whatever it is. But finding me, um, I typically tell people like, hey, you can just message me on Facebook. In my message requests, I check them always. And if you just need help, like, hey, Patrick, I don't even know what I need. Where should I start? I'm always down to help for free. Hey, let's hop on a quick call. I'll pass you over some, game plan step by step. Especially if it's a business I've worked with. And I mean, I've been doing this for, almost a little over half a decade, and I've worked with like 1,300 plus businesses in various industries. So chances are I could say, oh yeah, I've worked with that before. This is what I saw worked. I picked up these tricks from other industries that can apply to you. Like, yeah, Facebook's super easy. Anywhere really.
Okay, so now the last question I have, because we live in a crazy world. We got COVID, and we got parents that are homeschooling kids, and we're trying to work two jobs to get food on the table. So if I ask the average person to do something in 7 days, they're not likely to get to it. But if I ask
Right.
somebody to take an actionable step in the next 24 hours, they're more likely to do it.
For
So
sure.
if somebody's struggling with, getting their business out there, getting their business known, what is something they can do in the next 24 hours to start to right the ship?
So I would actually say that checklist that I made, and you can pop that into this podcast if there's a way to do that some way like that. But if in 24 hours you're like, all right, what can I start to look at? First things first, look over Google My Business. Make sure that everything is filled out. You have all of your attributes, you have your services listed, you have all the categories are there, you have all the pictures filled out. The pictures have descriptions. I mean, there's always something to do on Google My Business. And even if you have that laid out, next step is, okay, let's be consistent with posting. Let me add some new pictures. Let me respond to reviews. If I've already responded to reviews, you can edit responses, and whenever you respond, make sure you pop in your keywords. So instead of saying, hey, thanks for the 5-star review, go in and say, thanks, John, for stopping by uh, Patrick's Pizzeria here in Houston, Texas. I'd be happy to see you stop by again, So make sure that Google is consistently being improved upon, because that's so big. From there, you want to make sure the same things with all of your Instagram or your social profiles that you're using. So they're fully filled out. They have all the information. They're you don't have to necessarily be consistent. And a common misconception is I got to post every day. No, you really don't. Like, depending on what you do, you could probably get away with once every other day, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. But so have things filled out. That's number one. Once you have the basics filled out, then start building new things. Hey, I'm not on Apple Maps. I'm not on Bing Places. I need to start filling this stuff out. And it's not hard. It takes some time, and it's one of those things that if you do it, you have to stay up with it, and that's typically where people fall off. And if I'm being honest, that's typically why people hire me, is because we have teams and systems that can watch all this stuff, measure it, grow it, adjust it if you need be. Because the last thing you want to do is, if you got to change a phone number, go hunt down everything that you had the old phone number when. I mean, it sucks, but we do it. But yeah, if you had 24 hours, I'd say start there. Focus on the foundational things and look at just what's not filled out, what it hasn't been touched in a while. Once you get the foundation there, then start moving up into like, okay, consistent actions, social media content, Google posts, what consistent things can I do? And for content, I suggest laying out and planning ahead. It's just so much better, because the problem that a lot of businesses have is not, I don't have time to post. I mean, let's face it, posting takes 30 seconds. I don't have the time to sit down and think of what to post. And so what I recommend is just get a notebook or a notepad, and anytime you get an idea, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like, if you're a pizza shop, literally just post a video of you spinning a pizza or making a pizza. I mean, like, little things like that. You don't have to be Domino's, you don't have to have a crazy thing to post. I mean, especially if you're a mom and pop business, like, now more than ever, people want a mom and pop business. Show that you're a mom and pop business. But foundation, consistent content, and then from there, that's when I say you start getting into the in-depth optimizations and, like, okay, how can we squeeze more out of what we have? But you don't want to try and squeeze more out of what you have whenever you don't even have, a full lemon to squeeze, if that makes sense.
I love that. So, guys, definitely check out my brother Patrick. Check out what he's doing. Follow him. He's everywhere. He's on, he's all over Vetrepreneur Tribe. He's all over Success Engineers with our friend, Dr. Robert Garcia. He's everywhere. Guys, I want to thank our sponsor for today. Without you guys, I would not be here. So if you guys love swag, Ginger and David make some amazing swag. They have a great company, designs, and they will design everything for you. American made, 100%. Patrick, brother, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your friendship for all these years. Appreciate you.
Oh man, happy to be on here, and definitely, like, I'm not gonna lie, some of the stuff that you post about, it's inspiring, because, like, I know your story, I know what you do, and it's like, as I said in the beginning, man, you're one of the most selfless people I've ever met.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. Well, God bless you and have a beautiful week, man. Crush it.
There we go. Same to you, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. Please hit subscribe and share. Please feel free to leave us a comment.